we can hear 5 rhythms. In Latin music, you hear 5 rhythms at one time. So I realized that in order, but it wasn't being appreciated. That is, it's so normal for us that we're not looking at it as art. We have begun to look at our music as, well, that's popular music. It's okay. It'll always be here. It won't always be here.
Hey, Common Sense, thank you so much for joining us. Today, you are in for a delicious treat. I just want to say that. A delicious treat. We are so honored to have one of the most prolific writers, prolific poets, and prolific activists out there. Please help me welcome Felipe Luciano. You have done so many things in your life, from activism to poetry to public speaking. But one of the passions and one of the things that you have been consistent with most of your adult life has been Latin music, bringing Latin music to audiences. You started way back at WRVR, and now today you have a program called Latin Roots that can be found on WBAI every Saturday. I want to talk about that program because you really invest in culture, in music, in bringing musicians and artists to talk to you. And I find it is probably one of the most important radio programs out there today.
The answer to that, or an explanation for that, is that a long time ago I realized that one of the organizing tools in politics is culture, is music. Black people, as a rule, have the most refined auditory nerves in the world. We hear rhythms differently. We can do polyrhythms with no problem. We do polytonal in a way that nobody does it. John Coltrane is not an anomaly. He's not someone who came out from Mars. That is normal for us. We can hear 3 songs at one time. We can hear 5 rhythms. In Latin music, you hear 5 rhythms at one time. So I realized that but it wasn't being appreciated. That is, it's so normal for us that we're not looking at it as art. We have begun to look at our music as, well, that's popular music. It's okay. It'll always be here. It won't always be here. And so I decided many, many years ago, maybe 50 years ago, I decided to take Latin music and put it on a pedestal. You ever seen those photographs? Andy Warhol did this effectively with the Campbell soup can. He took it up and made it an icon. And we began to look at it differently. He did he did an image of Elizabeth Taylor. And suddenly we began to, wow, that's interesting. Mao Zedong, he did the same thing with him, put him in many colors. I'm taking the music of our forefathers and putting it on a pedestal and saying to people, listen to this. You hear rap, you hear house music, you hear all of the stuff that you're listening to, spoken word. Listen to this music and hear the complexity and the simplicity and the beauty of this music. And we've been able to convert a lot of people, not only Black and Puerto Rican, but white as well, to the effervescence, the universality of this music. And I started years ago, and I still continue to do it every Saturday on WBAI FM, 99.5 FM. And for those who can't get it in their particular cities or countries, they can go on the computer and look up WBAI.org and get the music live stream, or they can archive the music. You can get it after I finish the show. And look for Latin Roots from 2 to 4 p.m. on Saturdays.
And I recommend everybody go to the archives because you have conducted some wonderful interviews with our greats like Eddie Palmieri, Ruben Blades,
Gilberto Santa Rosa.
Yes. And not only that, you continue to bring people to the forefront that are in politics, that are in media, that are in writing, in poetry. You know, you give us a full spectrum of the Latino experience.
Well, I love those glowing words. Those are very kind words, Lydia Nicole. I really appreciate that very much. I think that for me, it's not work. It's passion. And when things are not work and they're passion, you do them effortlessly. You do them even if you're sick. You do them. On the other day, I got very, very sick, and I wasn't sure that I could do the show. And I called everybody. I called Ray Suarez, who was one of the great journalists in PBS. I called Tonka, my publicist. I called everybody, and I said, I can't do it. I won't be able to do it. I called my program director. I went back to bed, and I laid down for a while, for a few hours. But in me, it was, I'd love for people to hear this music. I'd love for them to hear this particular side. I'd love for them to hear this particular cha-cha-cha, this rumba. And in the middle of the night, I got up and programmed the entire show and did it. That's when you know that this is your passion. That's when you know that this is your poetry. Besides the written poetry, that this is your poetry. I love doing it. And I wish I could do it on a wider scale. My goal is to have people watch me do it. Watch the musicians come in and play, small groups, watch them talk, and at the same time, have them interact with the public. I think that's the show to do. That's where I want to go with this.
Yeah, so in the 70s, you started immersing yourself in Latin music. How did that come about?
I began the odyssey in Latin music through my family. My family members were always musical. My mother loved Tito Puente, Machito, Tito Rodriguez. My father loved Cortijo and all of the jazz guys. My mother, in terms of jazz, my mother loved Ella Fitzgerald. She was much more palatable to her, much more articulate. My father liked the funk. He liked Count Basie, Sarah Vaughan, that kind of stuff. So I came from a very musical family. In fact, in order to get to my father, who had already left by the time I was 3, my mother used to sing when he came in, and she sang in perfect pitch. Someday he'll come along, the man I love, and he would get so mad, and he'll be big and strong, the man I love. And she'd sing it as she was cleaning, as he was talking to us, and he would say, "Aurora, stop that song." And she said, "I'm just singing a song." I began to realize the power of music. I love music since the very beginning. I used to have perfect pitch. My voice is not as good as it used to be. I picked up instruments. I picked up the alto sax, the trombone. I love music. And if I weren't a reporter, or if I hadn't become a reporter or an activist or a chairman of the Young Lords during the last poets, I probably would have been a musician. I love percussion too. Any type of drum, if it's played well, and if it's played with passion and elegant, I love it. So I am very much into music. That said, I started in radio right after my leaving the Young Lords. There was a white woman named Chris Miller, who had a show on WRBR. It was a political talk show. And she asked me to come and be interviewed. I interviewed with her, and she liked it so much. She said, "You got to be on this station." And she went into the general manager. I've never seen such boldness. White folks got some stuff to them. And she went up to this guy, very, very self-effacing, one of these kind of Quaker guys, and she wanted to say, "You got to bring him in." And he looked at me, and she said, "His name is Felipe Luciano. He's with the Young Lords. You got to get him on this program." And he said, "Oh, okay, we'll see." She said, "No, okay, now." And believe it or not, he said, "We do have a slot open from 12 to 5. Do you think you can handle that?" And I said, "Sure I can." Not understand 12 to 5. That means I had to stay up all night and stay up that morning too. But I did it. It was an instant hit. Instant. The thirst for Latin music was so great. Bus drivers would tell me, you almost get me killed, man. I'm listening to this music. By the time I go home, I'm enthused. Cab drivers, hotel workers, the night people, if you will. All of them loved this show. And it became a hit, and that's how I started with Latin Roots on RVR. Eventually, I got fired. My politics was too left-wing. And Frankie Crocker called me from WBLS. I was in shock. He said, "I like what you do. Would you like to come here and start with me and be my, what do they call it? My lead-in." I said, "Sure." I didn't have a job. And I wasn't making any money with WRVR. Do you know something? I'll never forget that. I went there. I spoke to him. He said, "The only thing is that you can't put Latin music on." I said, "Frankie, that's hard for me, man. This is what I do." He said, I got you. I'll try to include it in from time to time. And he did, by the way, from time to time. He was a Sagittarian like me. I liked his style. I've never seen a man who was so brilliant in terms of programming. Frankie was one of the most brilliant programmers I've ever seen. And between he, Wanda Ramos, and a little girl named Lydia Nicole, they made that station the top station in New York, the top in New York. And I began to understand how you program, how you do light rotation, medium rotation, heavy rotation, how you treat record producers, how you don't get too cozy with people who are selling records because all they want you to do is sell a record, how important it is to resist corruption in this business, resist the drugs, the women, and the money that's being offered to you in order to play these records. All of that I learned both in Latin music and with Frankie Crocker and WBLS.